"I've been aching down there," the mail-order bride confessed. The lonely cowboy did this. Clara's heart pounded as the stagecoach rolled slowly along the dusty trail. She pressed her hands to the worn leather of her suitcase, trying to steady herself, but the nervousness would not leave her. Everything about this journey felt like stepping into a new world, one she'd only read about in letters and newspapers. The small town she was headed to was nothing like the busy streets of Boston she had grown up in. Here, the horizon stretched endlessly, dotted with hills and clusters of wooden houses that seemed to cling to the land as if for survival. She looked out the window, watching the sun sink low, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple. The air smelled different here, dry, earthy, with a faint scent of horses and wood smoke. It made her stomach twist with a mixture of excitement and fear. She was traveling across the country to marry a man she had never met, a mail-order bride. The thought made her cheeks warm. She had read about these arrangements in letters from her aunt, who had once known a woman who tried it. She had said it could bring happiness or heartbreak in equal measure. Clara didn't know which awaited her, but she had decided she could not stay in Boston, not after feeling trapped for so long in her small apartment with her daily routine that never seemed to change. The stagecoach jolted over a hidden rock, and Clara gripped her suitcase tighter. Her thoughts wandered to Sam, the man she would marry. She had only seen his photograph and read the short letters he had written in reply to hers. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a serious face framed by sun-kissed hair. The letters had been polite, sometimes warm, but always brief. There was a quiet strength in his words that she found comforting, but there was also an edge of loneliness that mirrored her own. She wondered what it would be like to live with a man who had spent most of his adult life alone, tending a ranch and talking mostly to the animals. Clara had imagined this moment countless times, the moment she would first see him in person. Would he smile? Would he be kind? Would he judge her for being nervous or unsure? She shook her head to chase away the doubts. She had made this choice. She had wanted adventure, a life different from the predictable path she had grown weary of. Perhaps, she thought, there was something brave in stepping into the unknown, something that would teach her about herself. The stagecoach slowed as it entered a small clearing, the town emerging slowly from the haze of dust. Claire's eyes widened as she saw the wooden buildings lining a single main street. A general store, a blacksmith's forge, a small church with a steeple reaching toward the sky, and a few other homes scattered around. Horses were tied to posts, and a couple of children ran along the dirt road, laughing as a dog chased them. It was quieter than she had imagined, peaceful in a way that was almost strange after the constant noise of city life. She stepped down from the coach, her boots sinking slightly in the soft dirt. Her suitcase felt heavier than ever, as if it carried not just clothes but the weight of all the unknowns ahead. People glanced at her with curiosity, their eyes lingering a moment before returning to their chores. Clara felt self-conscious, acutely aware of her appearance. Her dress was neat but simple, her hair pinned back to keep it out of her face. She reminded herself that appearances were less important here than in the city. What mattered was strength, kindness, and a willingness to work. And there he was, Sam, standing a few yards away, near a wooden fence where a couple of horses grazed. He was even taller than in the photograph, his shoulders broad and strong, his hands roughened by years of work. His eyes, a deep shade of brown, studied her carefully, not unkindly, but with a measured seriousness that made her stomach flutter. He gave a small nod in greeting, and she realized he was as unsure of this meeting as she was. "Clara?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "Yes," she replied, her own voice trembling slightly. He stepped closer, holding out a hand in a polite gesture that felt almost formal. She shook it, feeling the strength in his grip. There was a moment of silence, a space where neither knew what to say next. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying the faint smell of hay and smoke. Clara felt a pang of nervousness. How would they live together? How could two strangers build a life from nothing in this lonely place? "Your things," Sam said finally, motioning toward the stagecoach. "I'll help you." Clara nodded, grateful for the small act of kindness. They walked toward the ranch together, the only sounds the crunch of their boots on the dirt and the occasional whinny of a horse. The house came into view, a modest wooden structure with a porch that sagged slightly under the weight of years. Clara felt a flutter of hope. This would be her home, her new beginning. Inside, the air was warm but smelled faintly of dust and wood polish. Sam showed her around, pointing out the rooms she would use and the small kitchen where they would eat together. Clara tried to memorize every detail, knowing that soon this house would feel like home, or it would not. She unpacked her things slowly, placing her belongings carefully in the small wardrobe. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but it was heavy, filled with unspoken questions and cautious curiosity. As the day turned into evening, Sam prepared a simple dinner of stew and bread. Clara watched him work, noticing the care he took in chopping vegetables and stirring the pot. There was something steady and reliable about him, a presence that seemed to promise safety and stability. She wondered if she could learn to trust him, to rely on him not just for companionship, but for partnership in the hard work of life on the ranch. After dinner, they sat on the porch, the sky above them a blanket of stars. Clara felt a sense of wonder at the vastness of the land, the quiet beauty of the night. Sam spoke softly about the ranch, the work it required, and the few neighbors they had. She listened intently, asking questions, eager to understand the life she had entered. There was no rushing here, no pretense, just honesty and simplicity. For the first time in years, Clara felt a glimmer of peace. She had left behind the predictable, sometimes suffocating life of the city, and though uncertainty lay ahead, she felt a strange comfort in the honesty of this new place. She realized that the loneliness she had carried might not vanish immediately, but perhaps it could be shared, softened, and understood. Sam looked at her then, and for a moment the walls he had built around himself seemed to lower slightly. He did not speak of love or passion, but there was a quiet understanding in his gaze, a recognition that two people, even strangers, could find companionship in the shared struggles of life. Clara smiled softly, feeling a fragile thread of connection begin to form. The night grew colder, and they went inside, each to their own space. Clara lay awake for a long time listening to the sounds of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind through the cracks in the walls, the occasional snort of a horse outside. She thought about the journey ahead, about the work, the quiet, and the moments of doubt that would surely come. But she also thought about the possibility of hope, of friendship, and perhaps in time something deeper. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara whispered a small prayer, not for certainty or perfection, but for courage, to face each day in this new life with an open heart and a steady spirit, and somewhere in the stillness the ranch seemed to hold its breath with her, waiting to see what the future would bring. Days passed slowly on the ranch, each one stretching longer than the last. Clara woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the soft neighing of horses. The early mornings were quiet, almost painfully so, compared to the busy streets of Boston she had known. Yet there was a peaceful rhythm to it, a gentle flow that she was slowly beginning to appreciate. She dressed quickly in the plain, practical clothes Sam had suggested she wear, and stepped outside, taking in the fresh morning air. The land seemed to go on forever, golden fields waving in the wind, dotted with clusters of green trees. Sam was already outside, tending to the horses. He moved with practiced ease, feeding them and checking their coats for cuts or dirt. Clara watched him for a moment, admiring the quiet strength in his movements. Everything about him seemed steady, dependable, almost unchanging. She wanted to be useful here, to show that she could manage the work, even though the tasks were entirely new to her. She remembered the letters he had written, always polite, sometimes brief, but with an unmistakable sense of responsibility and care. Now, seeing him in action, she understood what those letters had hinted at. Sam was a man who took life seriously, who treated work and duty as inseparable from respect for others. "Morning," Sam said without looking up, his voice low but welcoming. "Morning, Clara," replied, her voice tentative. She wanted to ask questions, to show interest, but she was also afraid of saying something wrong. "Come help me with the feed," he said finally, pointing to the buckets lined up along the fence. Clara nodded and moved closer. She lifted a bucket, her arms straining under its weight. Sam noticed and stepped closer, showing her a better way to carry it. She appreciated the quiet patience in his instruction, the way he didn't make her feel foolish for not knowing what to do. The days followed a similar rhythm. Mornings were for chores, feeding the animals, cleaning the barn, checking fences. Afternoons were for tending the fields or fixing things around the house. Evenings brought a sense of quiet satisfaction, a moment to sit together after a long day, sharing a simple meal and listening to the wind rustle through the trees. Clara found herself learning new skills almost daily. At first, everything was difficult, lifting hay bales, cleaning stalls, handling the horses, but gradually her movements became more confident, more certain. Sam noticed and occasionally nodded in approval, though he rarely said much. Even in the silence, however, Clara could feel a subtle tension between them. They spoke of chores and the land, but rarely about themselves. Clara wondered about his past, about the life he had lived before she arrived. Sam, in turn, seemed careful not to reveal too much, keeping his feelings and thoughts close to his chest. Yet, there were moments, small, fleeting, when the walls between them lowered, A shared laugh over a clumsy attempt at feeding the chickens, a smile exchanged over the kitchen table while washing dishes, a glance that lingered a little too long. These moments, though quiet, gave Clara hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a soft pink, Clara found herself sitting on the porch watching Sam mend a broken fence post. She noticed how the light caught the lines on his face, how his hands moved deftly with the tools. He didn't notice her watching, absorbed in his work, but Clara felt a warmth in her chest. It was a new feeling, unfamiliar and slightly frightening. She realized she was beginning to care for this man in ways she hadn't expected. As days turned into weeks, Clara began to understand the subtle rules of ranch life. There was a rhythm to everything, a pattern that required patience and attention. Sam's expectations were simple but clear. Work hard, take care of the animals, and respect the land. Yet within these expectations, there was also room for kindness, for shared moments of quiet connection. And Clara began to feel less like a stranger in this place, more like a participant in the life Sam had built. Despite this growing comfort, Clara could not ignore a certain ache she had been feeling, a mix of physical discomfort and emotional longing. It was something she had never discussed with anyone, not even her closest friends. She felt hesitant, almost embarrassed about bringing it up. She worried it might seem inappropriate or make Sam uncomfortable. Yet the more time she spent with him, the more she realized that keeping it to herself was becoming a burden. One afternoon, after a particularly long day of work in the fields, Clara sat on the porch, her hands sore from lifting buckets and raking soil. Sam had gone inside to check on some supplies, leaving her in a rare moment of solitude. She leaned back, closing her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. The ache in her body was there, persistent and unrelenting. She sighed, a small sound of frustration and longing. When Sam returned, she hesitated, unsure how to bring up her concern. She wanted to be honest, to share what she was feeling, but fear held her back. He set down the tools and noticed her expression. "You look tired," he said gently. "I am," she admitted. "It's everything, I guess. The work, the adjustment, and..." Her voice trailed off, unsure how to continue. He looked at her, waiting patiently. There was no impatience or judgment, only a steady presence that made her feel safer than she had in weeks. Taking a deep breath, Clara spoke softly. "I've been aching down there." Her words were simple, straightforward, but they carried all the vulnerability she felt. Sam's brow furrowed slightly, but he did not react with embarrassment or discomfort. Instead, he nodded slowly as if acknowledging the courage it took for her to speak. "I see," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "We'll figure it out." The reassurance in his words surprised her. She had feared rejection or awkwardness, but instead, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She realized that this man, this quiet, reserved cowboy, was someone she could trust, someone who would listen without judgment. In the following days, Sam showed a quiet attentiveness that Clara had not expected. He asked questions about how she was feeling, about what made the ache worse, and what she could do to feel better. Didn't rush or push, he simply offered support, practical advice, and gentle encouragement. Clara felt cared for in a way she had never experienced before. Their connection began to deepen beyond the chores and the routine of ranch life. Sam started sharing small stories from his past, the time he had lost his wife, the challenges of keeping the ranch running, moments of quiet triumph and failure. Clara listened, offering her own stories in return, finding the courage to open up about her life in the city, her family, and her dreams. Through these conversations, a bond began to form. It was not dramatic or sudden, but slow and steady, built on mutual respect, understanding, and patience. Clara realized that trust and intimacy were not just about romance. They were about knowing someone deeply, about feeling safe in their presence, about being able to share fears and hopes without shame. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, Clara felt a small spark of courage. She turned to Sam and smiled, her voice gentle but firm. "Thank you," she said, "for listening, for caring, for making me feel like I belong here." Sam looked at her, his expression softening. "You do belong," he said simply. "We'll face everything together, you and I." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since arriving, she felt truly at home, not just in the house or on the ranch, but with Sam. She realized that this journey, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, was leading her to a place of trust, connection, and hope. That night, as Clara lay in bed, she thought about the days ahead. There would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and long, tiring work. But she no longer felt alone. She had found someone who would listen, who would care, who would meet her vulnerability with understanding. And in that knowledge, she found a quiet courage, a readiness to face whatever came next, together. The mornings on the ranch had begun to feel almost predictable, but in the best way possible. Clara had started to anticipate the rhythm of the day, the early light spilling over the hills, the sound of roosters crowing, and the gentle neighs and whinnies of the horses as they stirred in their stalls. Yet even with this routine, each day brought small surprises, small challenges that reminded her life here was very different from the city she had left behind. One morning, Clara rose earlier than usual. The sunlight had barely kissed the horizon when she went outside to help Sam with the horses. She had grown stronger since arriving, her arms more used to the daily work, her movements less clumsy. Sam noticed immediately, giving her a brief nod of approval. There was no grand praise, just a quiet acknowledgement that spoke volumes. "You're improving fast," he said as he handed her a brush. The horses noticed, too. Clara smiled, brushing the mare's coat gently. She could feel the warmth of the animal under her hand, the steady rhythm of its breathing. "They're easier to handle than I thought," she admitted, laughing softly. "At first I thought they might throw me off or kick me." Sam chuckled. "They can be stubborn, but they know who's patient. That's all it takes." As the morning passed, they worked together in a rhythm that felt almost like a conversation without words. Clara began to notice the small things about Sam, the way he moved quietly, carefully, always aware of the animals and the land, the way he spoke in calm tones that seemed to make the ranch itself feel steadier, the way he occasionally looked at her with a softness that betrayed his usually reserved nature. But alongside this growing sense of ease, Clara still felt the ache she had mentioned earlier. It was subtle but persistent, a discomfort she could not ignore. She had tried to manage it on her own, but it interfered with her work, her sleep, and her overall sense of well-being. She knew she could not continue this way forever. The quiet moments with Sam made her realize she might be able to trust him with her worries, just as she had begun to trust him with the chores and the routines of ranch life. One afternoon, after finishing the field work, Clara sat on the porch, her hands resting in her lap. Sam had gone inside to check the supplies, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The sun was hot, the sky a brilliant blue, and the gentle breeze rustled the leaves above. She realized she could no longer avoid the conversation she needed to have. Her heart pounded as she waited for him to return. Sam appeared moments later, carrying a small basket of supplies. "Thought you might like some water," he said, setting it beside her. His eyes met hers with quiet attentiveness. Clara took a deep breath. "Sam, I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice shaking slightly. He sat beside her, a steady presence. "Of course," he said simply. "I've been feeling discomfort," Clara began, choosing her words carefully. "It's been affecting me for some time. I wasn't sure how to bring it up." She paused, glancing at his calm, understanding face. "I trust you, and I thought maybe you could help me figure out what to do." Sam nodded slowly, showing neither shock nor embarrassment. "We'll handle it," he said in his quiet, reassuring tone. "We'll make sure you're comfortable, and we'll find a way to ease the discomfort." What surprised Clara most was the practicality in his response. He didn't question her feelings or make her feel ashamed. Instead, he focused on solutions. Over the next several days, Sam helped her in ways both practical and gentle. He adjusted her chores so they were less strenuous, showed her small techniques for movement and posture to relieve tension, and even suggested local remedies that might bring relief. Each gesture was thoughtful, showing a deep respect for her body and her well-being. Through this process, Clara realized that their relationship was evolving. It was no longer just about survival or companionship. It was about care, empathy, and mutual respect. She felt herself relaxing around him in ways she had never experienced before. The walls she had built in self-protection slowly began to crumble, and she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to ask for help, and to accept it without hesitation. One evening after a long day in the fields, Sam suggested they sit by the barn and rest. He handed Clara a cloth to wipe the sweat from her brow and offered her a cool drink of water. The gesture was small, but it carried a warmth that made her heart lift. She realized she felt safe with him, safe enough to express her discomfort, her fears, and her hopes without worry. They sat together in silence for a few moments, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Clara noticed the way the light softened Sam's features, how the day's labor had left a faint dusting of dirt on his hands and face. There was something grounding about him, something that made her feel that despite the vastness of the land and the uncertainty of her new life, she was not alone. Over the following week, their connection continued to grow. Sam introduced Clara to more aspects of ranch life, mending fences with proper technique, understanding the behavior of the horses, and even caring for the small garden behind the house. Each lesson was shared with patience, and Clara found herself learning not just skills, but also the value of perseverance, attention to detail, and quiet dedication. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the garden, Clara realized she was smiling more than she had in months. She felt a sense of accomplishment in the simple tasks, watering the plants, planting seeds, carefully tending the soil. Sam noticed her contentment and offered a rare smile, one that lit up his usually serious face. "You're doing well," he said. "I'm glad you're enjoying it." Clara nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She had not expected to find joy in such simple work, yet here it was, intertwined with the presence of someone who cared for her. It was not romantic in a dramatic sense yet, but it was profound in its simplicity. Trust, she realized, was forming between them. Not forced, not rushed, but steady and reliable. Evenings became their time to connect more personally. After the chores were done and the sun had set, they would sit together on the porch, sharing stories from their pasts. Sam spoke of his late wife in gentle terms, never dwelling on sorrow, but acknowledging the lessons and memories she had left behind. Clara shared stories of her family, her childhood, and the life she had known in Boston. They listened to each other with genuine interest, nodding, asking questions, and occasionally laughing together. During these moments, Clara felt a deepening bond. She realized that Sam's quiet attentiveness was more than politeness. It was a sign of care, a willingness to meet her where she was. She began to trust him not only with her stories, but with her vulnerabilities, knowing he would never ridicule or dismiss her feelings. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky, Clara spoke softly. "Sam, I feel better already. Just talking, just having someone understand, it means a lot." Sam looked at her, his expression calm and steady. "I'm glad," he said simply. "We'll face everything together. I want you to feel safe here." The reassurance in his voice gave Clara a sense of hope she had not expected to feel. She realized that life on the ranch, while hard, could also be a place of healing, growth, and connection. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to thrive. The days continued in this rhythm. Work, care, conversation, and quiet companionship. Clara's discomfort began to ease, not entirely, but enough for her to function comfortably and participate fully in the daily life of the ranch. More importantly, the emotional bond between her and Sam had strengthened. They had learned to communicate openly, to share responsibilities, and to support each other in both small and significant ways. Clara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She moved with more confidence, spoke with greater assurance, and felt a new sense of belonging. She no longer felt like a stranger in a strange land. She felt like part of a partnership, a team working together to maintain the ranch and care for each other. One night as Clara lay in bed, she reflected on the past few weeks. She had come to the West uncertain, afraid, and alone. Now, she felt connected, understood, and supported. Sam had shown her patience, respect, and empathy in ways that had allowed her to open up and trust him. The ache she had carried, once heavy and isolating, had begun to lift. Not entirely gone, but shared and understood. She realized that the greatest lesson of all was not about the ranch, the work, or even the physical relief she had found. It was about trust and vulnerability, about finding someone who would meet her halfway, who would listen, support, and care without judgment. And in that understanding, Clara felt a quiet strength settle within her, a sense of readiness to face whatever came next with courage and hope. The weeks on the ranch flowed like the gentle river nearby, steady and unhurried. Each day carried its own rhythm, the sun rising over the hills, the animals stirring, and the familiar tasks that made the ranch feel more like home. Clara had grown accustomed to the early mornings, the long hours in the sun, and the quiet solitude that once had terrified her. Yet she was no longer alone in that solitude. Sam was there, always present in his quiet, steady way, making the vast, lonely land feel less intimidating. One morning Clara woke to the soft crowing of the roosters and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. She dressed quickly in her simple clothes, brushing back her hair and securing it with a cloth tie. The morning air was crisp, the kind that filled her lungs and made her feel alive. She stepped outside to find Sam already in the barn, tending to the horses. The horses greeted him with familiar whinnies, and Clara smiled at the sight. There was a sense of order and comfort in the way he moved, a grace in the way he handled the animals, and a patience that made the hard work seem manageable. "Good morning," she called softly. Sam looked up and nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Morning." "Ready for today's chores?" Clara nodded. "I think so. I'm ready." They worked together in silence for a while. the quiet punctuated only by the sounds of hooves against the wooden floors, the rustle of hay, and the occasional bird call from outside. Clara had learned to anticipate Sam's movements, the way he approached tasks, and the care he took in every detail. She began to understand that life on the ranch required patience, attention, and respect for the land and its creatures. More importantly, it required trust in each other, in the routines, and in the knowledge that both were there to support one another. After the morning chores, they took a short break on the porch. Clara poured herself a small cup of water, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She noticed Sam watching the horizon, his expression thoughtful. Something about the way he carried himself intrigued her. There was strength in him, yes, but also a gentleness that was rare and comforting. She wanted to know him better, to understand the layers of the man who had welcomed her into this unfamiliar life without hesitation or judgment. Over the following days, Clara and Sam continued to develop their routines, but they also began to share more personal moments. It started with small things: laughter over spilled water, teasing each other about a stubborn mule, or swapping stories about their childhoods. Clara found herself opening up in ways she had not expected. She spoke of the bustling streets of Boston, the friends she had left behind, and the dreams she once held before the monotony of city life had weighed her down. Sam listened with genuine interest, occasionally sharing memories of his own youth, of the few friends he had known, and the life he had built from the ground up. One afternoon, after a long day of repairing a fence, Clara and Sam sat under the shade of a large oak tree. The heat of the day had waned, leaving a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves above. Clara leaned back against the rough bark, feeling the tension in her muscles slowly ease. She watched Sam carefully measure and align the posts, admiring his focus and the quiet confidence he exuded. "You make this look easy," she said softly. Sam glanced at her, a small grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It's all about practice," he replied, "and knowing where to start." Clara smiled. "I'm learning," she admitted. "Slowly, but I'm learning." He nodded approvingly. "That's what matters. Progress, not perfection." It was moments like these that Clara cherished. The simplicity of the day, the shared effort, and the quiet acknowledgement of each other's presence created a sense of connection that words could barely capture. She realized that her initial fears about being far from home and marrying a stranger had begun to fade. Here, with Sam, she felt a growing sense of belonging, a feeling she had not known she could experience again. Evenings became a time for reflection and gentle conversation. After the chores were done and the sun had dipped below the hills, they would sit on the porch with a simple meal of stew or bread and cheese. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was comforting. They had learned to enjoy each other's presence without needing to fill every moment with words. Yet when they spoke, it was meaningful, often revealing glimpses of their hopes, fears, and dreams. One evening, Clara felt a sudden urge to share something deeper. She had been carrying a quiet ache, a discomfort she had not yet fully expressed. But the trust she felt toward Sam encouraged her to speak. "Sam," she began hesitantly, "can I tell you something?" "Of course," he replied, his voice steady and reassuring. "I've been feeling uneasy lately," she said, choosing her words carefully. "It's been affecting my body and my mood, and I wasn't sure how to handle it on my own." She paused, glancing at him. "I thought maybe you could help me figure it out." Sam listened without interruption, his eyes kind and patient. "I understand," he said gently. "We'll take care of it together. You're not alone in this." The reassurance in his voice brought a sense of relief that Clara had not realized she had been longing for. She realized that this trust, this willingness to share vulnerabilities, was a foundation for a connection far stronger than she had anticipated. Over the next several days, Sam helped Clara in thoughtful, practical ways, adjusting her chores to reduce strain, showing her gentle stretches to relieve tension, and providing quiet support whenever she needed it. He had become more than just a partner in daily chores. He was a source of comfort, understanding, and quiet strength. She began to anticipate his actions, his advice, and even his rare smiles. Every gesture, no matter how small, reinforced the sense that they were building something real, something steady and dependable. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of the barn roof, a sudden gust of wind blew dust into Clara's eyes. Sam quickly moved to shield her, holding a cloth to her face while she blinked away the grit. The care in his actions, the attentiveness to her comfort made her heart swell with gratitude and warmth. "Thank you," she said softly. "You're welcome," he replied, his tone calm but sincere. "I want to make sure you're all right." It was not a dramatic moment, nor was it filled with grand gestures, but it was a turning point. Clara realized that true connection was built not on spectacle, but on everyday acts of care, attentiveness, and empathy. She felt seen, understood, and valued in a way she had not expected. As the days turned into weeks, Clara and Sam's bond continued to deepen. They shared quiet walks across the fields, watched sunsets from the porch, and even spent time together caring for the small garden behind the house. Each task, each conversation strengthened their connection, creating a sense of partnership that was both comforting and empowering. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together in the fading light, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Clara felt a gentle courage welling within her. She realized that the trust and companionship they had built allowed her to express feelings she had long kept hidden. The ache she had carried, the uncertainty and discomfort, could now be shared with someone who would listen, understand, and care. "Sam," she said quietly, "I'm grateful for everything, for your patience, your kindness, for helping me feel like I belong here." Sam looked at her, his expression softening. "You do belong," he replied. "We'll face everything together, Clara. You're not alone anymore." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, comfort, and quiet joy. She realized that the journey that had begun with uncertainty and fear had brought her to a place of connection, understanding, and trust. The bond she shared with Sam was not built on haste or expectation, but on patience, empathy, and shared experience. As she lay in bed that night, Clara reflected on the past weeks. She had come to the West unsure of what to expect, carrying fears and doubts about the unknown. Now she felt a sense of stability and hope. Sam's steady presence had shown her that vulnerability could be met with care, that trust could lead to strength, and that partnership could be built on shared effort, respect, and understanding. She drifted to sleep with a sense of peace she had not known in years, knowing that the bond she shared with Sam would guide her through whatever challenges lay ahead. The ranch, once overwhelming and intimidating, had become a place of growth, healing, and connection, a home not just for her body but for her heart as well. The days on the ranch had grown warmer, the sun climbing higher and lingering longer in the sky. Clara had begun to feel the rhythm of life here in every part of herself, from the ache of tired muscles after a day's labor to the quiet satisfaction of a well-tended garden. She had grown stronger, both in body and in spirit, and yet she knew there were still parts of herself she had not fully shared with Sam. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Clara found herself sitting on the porch, a blanket around her shoulders. The air was crisp and gentle, carrying the scent of hay, fresh earth, and the distant river. Sam had gone to fetch water for the evening meal, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She felt a strange mixture of nervousness and hope, a fluttering in her chest that had become familiar these past weeks. She thought back to the first days of her arrival, the uncertainty, the fear of a strange land and a stranger's household, the awkward silences, and the weight of the unknown. Now, those memories felt distant, almost unreal. She had come to this place carrying her loneliness, but in its stead, a quiet trust had formed. And with trust came courage. When Sam returned with the water, he noticed her quiet contemplation. "Everything all right?" he asked, setting the bucket down. Clara nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, mostly. I have something I want to tell you." Sam set the bucket aside and sat beside her. His expression was calm and patient, and it made her heart beat faster. She had spent countless hours imagining how she might speak these words, and now the moment had come. "I've been feeling discomfort," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "It's been difficult to manage, and I wasn't sure how to bring it up. But I trust you, and I hoped you could help me." Sam listened without interruption, his eyes steady and full of understanding. There was no judgment in his gaze, no hesitation, only a quiet, reassuring presence. "Thank you for telling me," he said gently. "We'll figure it out together. You're not alone." Relief washed over Clara. She had feared awkwardness or embarrassment, but instead she felt a profound sense of safety. Sam's calm, caring response encouraged her to speak more freely, to explain the ache she had carried for weeks, both physical and emotional. She described the discomfort she felt during the long days of work, the tension in her muscles, and the fatigue that sometimes weighed her down. She spoke openly about her worries, her insecurities, and the moments when she felt unsure of herself. Sam nodded thoughtfully. "We'll make sure it doesn't get in the way of your work or your comfort," he said. "We can adjust your tasks, and I can help you with stretches and small exercises to ease the strain. And if needed, we'll look for other ways to help." His words were simple, but they carried a depth of care that made Clara feel truly seen. She realized that this man, the quiet cowboy who had once seemed so distant, had become someone she could rely on completely. His willingness to listen, to act, and to care for her well-being created a bond far stronger than any she had known before. Over the next several days, Sam demonstrated his support in both practical and thoughtful ways. He helped her lift hay bales more easily, adjusted the chores so that they were less strenuous, and guided her through gentle exercises to relieve muscle tension. He checked in frequently, asking how she felt and if anything could make her more comfortable. Each gesture, no matter how small, reinforced her sense of trust and gratitude. Clara began to notice subtle changes in herself as well. She moved with more confidence, handled the horses with steadier hands, and even laughed more easily. The ache that had once weighed heavily on her now seemed more manageable, softened by the steady support and understanding she received. More importantly, she felt a deepening sense of connection with Sam, a shared understanding that went beyond chores or routines. One afternoon after a long day in the fields, they sat together under the shade of a large oak tree, the grass cool beneath them. Clara turned to Sam, her voice soft but earnest. "I don't think I've ever felt this cared for before," she admitted. "Not just physically, but emotionally. You've made me feel safe, understood, like I belong here." Sam looked at her, his expression gentle and unwavering. "You do belong," he said simply, "and I'm glad you trust me enough to share how you feel. That's the first step toward feeling better. Toward feeling whole." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of relief mixed with joy. She realized that the journey that had begun with uncertainty and fear had brought her to a place of connection and hope. She was no longer alone, and she no longer needed to carry her struggles silently. Over the next week, they continued to work together with a newfound closeness. Each shared task, repairing fences, tending the animals, planting seeds in the garden, was accompanied by quiet conversation and small gestures of care. Sam offered advice with patience, encouraged her gently, and celebrated the small victories with sincere approval. Clara in turn grew more confident in her abilities and more comfortable in expressing her feelings and needs. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a brilliant shade of gold, Clara and Sam walked along the edge of the ranch. The air was warm, carrying the earthy scent of soil and grass. Clara took a deep breath, feeling a sense of gratitude and peace she had not known in years. She glanced at Sam, noticing the way his face softened in the light, the calm determination in his steps, and the quiet strength that had become a source of comfort for her. "Sam," she began, her voice gentle, "I wanted to say thank you for everything. For listening, for helping me, for being patient." Sam turned to her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I care about you, Clara. That's enough." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the depth of emotion she had carried for so long. She realized that she had come to the West seeking adventure, seeking change, and perhaps seeking companionship. What she had found was far more than she had imagined, a partnership built on trust, respect, and genuine care. "I've never felt this safe with anyone," she said softly. "Not just safe, but understood. I can be myself here, and that means more than I can say." Sam reached out, placing a gentle hand over hers. "I'm glad," he said simply. "We'll face everything together, Clara. You don't have to carry anything alone anymore." The reassurance in his voice, the warmth of his touch, and the sincerity in his eyes filled her with a quiet sense of joy and relief. She realized that her journey, which had begun with fear and uncertainty, had led her to a place of comfort, understanding, and emotional closeness. She could trust him, rely on him, and share not only her struggles but also her hopes and dreams. In the following days, their bond continued to deepen. They worked side by side, shared meals, and spent quiet evenings on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. Clara felt herself opening up more fully, sharing stories, dreams, and even small fears she had once thought too trivial to mention. Sam listened patiently, offering advice when needed, but mostly providing a presence that was steady, reassuring, and deeply supportive. One evening, after a long day of tending to the animals and finishing repairs around the ranch, Clara sat with Sam on the porch, the sky a tapestry of stars above them. She felt a sense of contentment and gratitude she had not known in years. The ache that had once burdened her felt lighter, eased not only by practical support but by the emotional closeness they had developed. "Sam," she said softly, "I wanted to tell you something more. Something I've been feeling for a long time." He looked at her, his eyes calm and encouraging. "Go ahead," he said. "You can tell me anything." Clara took a deep breath, feeling the trust and care between them. I've been feeling a connection with you, something I can't quite explain. You've made me feel safe, understood, and valued in a way I never thought possible. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to face it with you." Sam's expression softened, a small, genuine smile spreading across his face. "I feel the same, Clara," he said. "We've built something strong here. I've learned to trust you, and I care for you more than I expected. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, joy, and hope. She realized that her confession, her vulnerability, had not been met with judgment or fear, but with understanding, acceptance, and shared emotion. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of connection and belonging, a reassurance that she had found a true partner in Sam, someone who would stand by her through challenges, joys, and all the days to come. As the night deepened and the stars twinkled overhead, Clara and Sam sat quietly together, hands brushing, hearts aligned, and minds at ease. The ranch, once a vast and lonely landscape, now felt like home, a place of comfort, trust, and shared life. The journey that had begun with uncertainty and fear had brought them to this moment of connection and hope, a moment that would mark the beginning of a life built on care, respect, and love.